Hello, this is a quick tutorial showing how to edit a Soundfont file in order to have it correctly play back a MIDI drum file that may not be playing back on the correct channel. So if you've ever gone to play a MIDI drum clip and heard this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So while it's interesting, it's not exactly the eighth note ride pattern that we would expect. It's a little bit more of a piano plonking around. And what we need to do to fix this is edit a sound font. So essentially what is happening here is in the MIDI file that we choose to play, it has a set of channels that are banks that it's playing the sound on. And in this case, it's looking for that very first bank because that's what the file tells it to do. And the first bank for most sound fonts is the grand piano sound. In order to fix this, we'll use our own sound font. For my example, I'm going to use this Roland GM drum kit. I've gotten it from this source here, this musicalartifacts.com, artifacts 849. And I like this one because it's 10 drum kits. They sound good to me. For preview and audition purposes. No melodic things are involved because we're not using any strings, we're not using any pianos or things of that nature. We'll go ahead and open it up. It'll load us in here. Some info about the Soundfont itself, and where we want to go is this presets tab. We will open it up here, and we're going to use this standard drum kit. We can audition it if we'd like by clicking on the little piano keys and playing. What we need to do is change this bank, this 128 here, and potentially the preset if you're using a different file. We're going to take the bank, and it needs to be the very first bank that the file looks for, which is bank 0, and the very first preset that it looks for, which is also 0, already set. We'll go ahead and save it, and now we have our file updated. If you'd like, you can use this utility to rename things, change samples, edit samples, anything like that. It's a very powerful editor, and it's a really neat freeware editor, this Polyphone sound font. With that completed, we'll come back into Resonic. We're going to open up our Soundbank folder, and that's where we'll place our newly created file. Here's the updated file, and here is my Soundbank folder for it. If you're using a different player, it might be in a different location. We'll drag that in there, and now in Resonic, we will ask it to rescan our sound banks, and then we'll select that new drum kit. If all went well, we should hear something like this. Much better. Now we're playing an actual drum sound. However, we've kind of gotten ourselves into a new predicament in that if we'd like to play something melodic, we're only going to hear drum sounds because that's all our sound font knows to provide from that very first bank of its file. So this should be a chord progression, but instead we have this. In my case, this is an okay trade-off. I'm all right to, if I know I'm going to be listening to something melodic, pick a sound font that's going to play pitches back and listen in that case. And if I'm doing something percussion oriented, to change that sound font and play it again. Another resource that you have available to you, if your goal is to have this in some sort of DAW, which is my goal here, is most of them have a preview built in for MIDI files. So in Bitwig in this case, if we preview this same chord progression, it uses the internal sound font and plays the chord back just fine. However, same as before, the drum file is kind of that plodding staccato sound. To get around this, what we can do is just simply drag and drop it onto a drum track. I've done that here. And when you play it back, you'll hear drum sounds as that's what the file is mapped to. It's just a MIDI file. Which for me is that end goal anyways. We're putting it with our own drum sounds, with our own samples, just auditioning the file makes it a little easier to use that player. The chord progression likely will be auditioned for me in Bitwig, and in this case I'll drop it in here, an identical one. It defaults to playing back on the polysynth. You'll note since this thinks it's audio, if you drag and drop a drum file in here, it also places itself onto polysynth. Because for Bitwig, I think it's using that channel header to see is this melodic or is this percussion, and it just sees both of these as that same bank header and plays them as a melodic instrument. So that's an okay trade-off for me. This is the closest answer that I could find as far as if this is able to be manipulated in Bitwig. It's from 2018, but it's asking about the MIDI loop preview. It's answered that not possible yet, but on the wish list for future consideration, and not working quite yet. I've used other softwares such as this QMIDI to get things playing back. For me, editing the Soundfont and Resonic seem to be the easiest and most stable way to get things working. So hopefully that was helpful. I've gone through several trial and errors editing hex files, modifying the MIDI files, and that seems to be the way to go. Nice and easy, fairly simple fix. Thank you for watching. Take care.